Welcome to Law and the Machine, where artificial intelligence meets the legal system, liability, regulation, intellectual property, and the government's uncomfortable role as both rulemaker and AI adopter. The law wasn't written for this.
103,000 custom AI agents, built by rank-and-file military personnel, not engineers, in less than 5 weeks.
And those aren't just chatbots. Those are semi-autonomous systems actively executing tasks across the Department of Defense's unclassified networks. There have been 1.1 million documented agent sessions already.
So the Pentagon has essentially unleashed an army of bespoke AI automations built by the very users who need them on its own systems. And it's doing so with a level of speed that would make Silicon Valley blush.
A blush that might turn to a full-blown panic attack when you consider the implications of move fast and break things in a national security context.
That statistic, 103,000 agents in under 5 weeks, 1.1 million sessions recorded, comes from recent reporting in Breaking Defense. It really brings home the scale of this grassroots AI adoption within the Pentagon. It's a staggering number.
It is. To put that in perspective, there is an average of 180,000 agent sessions per week right now. This isn't some pilot program anymore. It's a full-scale operational reality, and the way these agents are being created significantly alters the approach. It's what the Pentagon calls vibe coding.
Vibe coding. That sounds less like military protocol and more like a Gen Z TikTok trend. What does that actually mean in practice?
It's essentially a low-code or even no-code approach to deploying AI. Historically, if you wanted new software on a military network, you'd need a team of cleared software engineers, months of development, rigorous code reviews, and a centralized deployment process. With Google's Agent Designer on their GenAI.mil platform, that's all gone.
So instead of writing Python or C++, a soldier or a DoD civilian just tells a chatbot what they want the AI to do.
Precisely. They describe the desired outcome in natural language, the vibe, if you will, and the underlying large language model, in this case Google's Gemini, autonomously writes, structures, and deploys the actual code required to build that agent. The user doesn't need to understand API routing or database architecture. They just need to know the task they want automated.
And what kinds of tasks are these agents actually performing? Are these simple chat functions or something more substantial?
These are definitely not just passive chatbots answering trivia. The key word here is agentic. They take instructions and then execute multi-step actions. For example, the DoD reports they're being used to draft after-action reports, compiling raw debrief notes into formal lessons learned documents.
That makes sense, reducing administrative overhead.
Absolutely. But they're also drafting staff estimates, which are critical for operational requirements and logistical planning. They're automating workflow tasks like replying to emails, updating software trackers, and summarizing dense policy handbooks. These are tasks that directly feed into military operations and decision-making.
It sounds like an incredible boost to efficiency, but the vibe coding aspect, the speed, the sheer volume, this appears to be setting up a structural tension here. The Pentagon is notorious for its deliberate, often slow procurement processes. How are they justifying this rapid rollout?
They're framing it as an existential race. Andrew Mapps, the acting principal deputy at the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, or CDAO, has been quoted saying, "It's a race. The cycles are just getting shorter and shorter. We just don't have the luxury of taking such a deliberate approach." Another official reportedly said, "I'm on team go fast."
Team Go Fast. It sounds like they've adopted the Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things. But in the context of the Department of Defense, breaking things could mean far more than just a software bug. It could mean hallucinated logistical estimates affecting troop movements or critical supply chains. That's an unacceptably high stake for an ethos like that.
And this is where the policy frameworks, or lack thereof, becomes so critical. Because when challenged on the security implications of literally tens of thousands of decentralized user-generated AI agents, the Pentagon's primary defense has been bureaucratic. They state they are extending our proven security and governance models to the AI domain. And the cornerstone of that defense is that the Gen AI Mill platform possesses an Impact Level 5, or IL5, authorization to operate, an ATO.
An IL5 ATO. For listeners who aren't steeped in defense contracting jargon, what does that actually mean? Is it a stamp of approval that says this is safe?
In essence, yes. An IL5 ATO is a certification granted by the Defense Information Systems Agency, or DISA. It means a cloud environment is cleared to host national security systems and controlled unclassified information, or CUI.
And CUI, controlled unclassified information, isn't classified, but it's still highly sensitive, right?
Absolutely. It is data that, if aggregated or leaked, could severely damage national security. This includes technical schematics, troop movement logistics, personally identifiable information of military personnel, and even critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. So on paper, certifying a platform to handle IL5 data sounds robust.
But what you're suggesting is that this IL5 ATO, while critical for traditional systems, is a dangerous illusion when applied to something as dynamic as generative AI. It's a square peg in a very round hole.
Exactly. Historically, an ATO certified static software. Auditors would pore over the code, verify access controls, and confirm the system was safe because its behavior was deterministic. If you put X in, you consistently got Y out. But the Gemini Agent Designer allows non-technical users to generate dynamic, non-deterministic agents on the fly. The DoD didn't audit the code of 103,000 individual agents. They audited the platform that allows those agents to be created.
So it's like certifying a factory is safe, but not inspecting any of the 100,000 different products that factory then produces, especially when those products are autonomous and can evolve.
That's a perfect analogy. The certification is for the factory, not for the autonomous drones it's churning out. The analysis from Outcome Engineering points out this crucial policy versus product gap. They argue that you simply cannot govern a six-figure army of automations with PDF policy memos.
So if policies aren't enough, what does real governance look like in this context?
It has to be hard-coded into the product primitives themselves. For instance, agents need execution boundaries, like sandboxes, that technically restrict them from accessing folders outside their specific purview. There should be budget caps to prevent an agent from getting caught in an infinite loop and inadvertently DDoSing a network. And critically, there need to be human-in-the-loop constraints, action approvals hard-coded into the agent's workflow before it can, say, send an email or alter a database. Right now, the DoD is largely relying on the assumption that personnel will responsibly manage the agents they vibe code, and that, for anyone looking at cybersecurity, is a catastrophic vulnerability.
So this isn't just a theoretical problem. This sounds like an institutionalization of what's often called shadow IT, software used within an organization without official approval. But here, the DoD is actively encouraging it.
Precisely. By empowering every E4 and O3 to vibe code their own agents, the DoD has normalized shadow IT at a scale never seen before. And this creates a complete breakdown in the chain of command, or at least the chain of technical accountability.
How so?
Imagine an Army captain vibe codes an agent to parse logistics emails and automatically draft supply requisitions. That captain then transfers to a new base. Does the agent keep running? Who owns that agent? Who is responsible for its upkeep or its decommissioning? More critically, who owns the liability if that agent's underlying model updates and it suddenly begins hallucinating supply shortages, impacting real-world operations? The DoD simply lacks an enterprise-level registry to effectively enumerate, track, and decommission these micro-automations. It's a black hole of accountability.
This brings up the concept of automation bias. If an AI agent, which is not accountable in the traditional sense, generates a report that looks perfectly legitimate, using all the right military jargon, there's a human tendency to trust it, especially if that human officer is already overwhelmed with administrative tasks and just rubber stamps the document.
Exactly. And that's where the liability vacuum becomes so dangerous. If that agent hallucinated a critical data point, say it miscalculated the fuel requirements for a convoy, leading to a mission failure, who is legally and professionally liable? The soldier who vibe coded the agent, the officer who signed off on the document the agent produced, Google, who built the underlying LLM. The current legal framework was not written for this kind of decentralized agentic liability.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum. The security implications of this decentralized vibe-coding army are being flagged against a very specific and alarming current threat landscape.
Indeed, the Intel Rift Intelligence Desk reported just this month that the White House and allied cyber agencies have issued severe warnings about China-backed efforts to steal U.S. AI technology, operating on an industrial scale. Simultaneously, adversaries are shifting tactics, covertly compromising everyday consumer routers and IoT devices to conceal malicious activity and gain persistent network access.
So you have nation-state adversaries actively targeting AI tech and infrastructure, and the DoD is deploying 100,000 custom AI agents on unclassified networks, many potentially accessible from less secure environments like a teleworking employee's home network.
That's the convergence. If a DoD employee teleworking from home has their consumer router compromised by a state-sponsored hacker, that hacker now has a potential pathway to hijack an AI agent. And because these agents are designed to autonomously compile data and draft reports, an adversary wouldn't even need to manually steal data. They could simply alter the agent's prompt to silently exfiltrate controlled unclassified information to an external server. It turns the agent into a willing, unwitting spy.
This leads to the recurring segment, The Conflict Docket, which explores the blurring lines between AI regulators, contractors, and lobbyists. And in this story, Google's role is absolutely central.
It is. The Department of Defense, like many large organizations, is desperate to integrate generative AI, but it simply lacks the internal engineering talent and infrastructure to build these frontier models themselves. So it's entirely dependent on big tech.
And Google, specifically Google Cloud, became that critical partner.
Yes, on December 9, 2025, the DoD's Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, the CDAO, formally selected Google Cloud's Gemini for Government as the first enterprise AI deployed on their GenAI.mil platform. This was rolled out to 3 million civilian and military personnel. Then, just a few months later, on March 10, 2026, Google introduced its Agent Designer to the platform, explicitly marketing it as a no or low-code platform requiring no programming skills.
So, Google provides the underlying model, the platform, and then the tool that allows anyone to build these custom agents.
Exactly. And this sets up the central conflict the discussion is tracking. The government is acting as the rulemaker, but it's effectively outsourcing the definition of those rules to the very vendor it's buying from.
When the CDAO granted that IL5 authorization to operate to Gemini and the Agent Designer, they relied heavily on Google's own assurances of security. This goes back to the earlier point about certifying the factory, but not the products.
It's precisely that. Karen DeHoot, the CEO of Google Public Sector, framed that December contract as a testament to Google's deep commitment to security, sovereign data protection, and the unique power of AI. But because the DoD lacks the technical literacy and the internal tooling to audit 1.1 million dynamic agent sessions, they are effectively forced to trust Google's black box safety metrics. Google defined the technical parameters of the sandboxes that contain these agents. Google defined the data sovereignty controls. And Google built the model that ultimately decides what constitutes a safe, vibe-coded prompt.
It sounds like the DoD isn't regulating Google so much as Google is dictating the terms of compliance to the DoD. This isn't an isolated incident either, is it? The discussion has seen this pattern of regulatory capture before.
This is a classic manifestation. The discussion saw a similar dynamic in April 2024, for example, when the Department of Homeland Security established its AI Safety and Security Board. That board was tasked with advising the government on the safe deployment of AI in critical infrastructure. Yet 14 of the 22 board members were CEOs or executives of the very tech companies building that AI. Civil liberties groups, like the Center for AI and Digital Policy, explicitly warned that the board's makeup tilted heavily toward corporate interests that profit from government contracts and minimal regulation. The Google and GenAI.mil dynamic is the ultimate manifestation of this.
When the Pentagon grants a security authorization to a black box AI agent builder, are they actually regulating the technology or just laundering a tech giant's internal safety metrics through a government stamp of approval?
The Pentagon's vibe coding spree isn't just a military anomaly, it sets a massive precedent. The U.S. military is widely considered the gold standard for operational security and risk management globally. If the DoD normalizes vibe coding as a legitimate way to process sensitive data, it sends an undeniable market signal.
So, if the DoD does it, everyone else will follow. Civilian agencies, hospital networks managing HIPAA-protected patient data, Fortune 500 companies with proprietary trade secrets, they'll all look at the DoD's adoption metrics of 1.1 million sessions in 5 weeks and push their own IT departments to deploy agentic AI.
Exactly. And the false comfort of that IL-5 ATO, which the discussion covered earlier, will be replicated in the private sector. Companies will point to their SOC 2 compliance or ISO certifications for the underlying platform and believe that because the platform is certified, the thousands of agents their employees build on it are inherently safe. They'll miss the crucial distinction that a platform certification is not the same as a certification for dynamic, user-generated AI agents.
And this is happening in a complete regulatory vacuum, isn't it? Existing legal and policy frameworks aren't even close to catching up to this reality.
Not at all. Current regulatory efforts, like the EU AI Act or state-level bills in the US, are overwhelmingly focused on regulating the foundational models themselves, mandating red teaming, bias testing, and transparency reports for systems like GPT-4 or Gemini. They're looking at the big, general-purpose models.
But the actual operational risk isn't just the foundational model. It's how individual, non-technical users connect that model to live data and granted execution permissions through these agents.
That's precisely it. The danger isn't just the model, it's the agent, how it's prompted, and what it's allowed to do. The law has no framework for regulating low-code agent deployment at an enterprise scale. The situation is completely outpaced.
So to synthesize some of the key insights here, it sounds like there is an efficiency imperative clashing head-on with a governance vacuum.
That's a core takeaway. The Pentagon is celebrating 100,000 agents as a victory for efficiency and combat readiness, but what they've created is an unprecedented level of decentralized shadow IT that operates outside traditional accountability structures.
And the reliance on a legacy certification like the IL-5 ATO, while sounding robust, is ultimately a dangerous illusion in the context of dynamic, non-deterministic AI agents. It gives a false sense of security.
Right. It's certifying the factory, not the potentially hazardous products it creates. And this illusion of security is especially concerning given the current cybersecurity threat landscape, where nation-state actors are actively targeting AI infrastructure. The convergence of these factors creates a massive, poorly understood attack surface.
And the conflict docket point is critical here too. There is a significant instance of regulatory capture where a major tech vendor isn't just building the technology, but is effectively setting the safety standards for its deployment within the government.
Absolutely. Google is effectively acting as both the primary contractor and the de facto regulator for this critical national security infrastructure.
So, as this vibe coding spree continues, what are the biggest questions that listeners should be grappling with?
The first is, what happens when the illusion shatters? When an agent hallucinates a critical logistics order that affects real operations, or when a state-sponsored hacker successfully hijacks an agent to exfiltrate CUI, who is held accountable, and what mechanisms are in place to prevent it from happening again?
And perhaps more broadly, if the gold standard for operational security, the U.S. military, is embracing this model, is the world inevitably heading towards a world where automated chaos is simply the cost of doing business with AI, both in government and in the private sector?
It's a stark question. Is efficiency without governance truly progress, or just automated chaos waiting to unfold?
That's all for Law and the Machine. Join us next time as we continue exploring where AI and the law collide. If you found this useful, subscribe. We appreciate it.
The law will catch up, eventually.